When we think about the divide between good and evil, we tend to picture like a concrete wall, just this massive impenetrable barrier.
Right, yeah. A very clear boundary.
Exactly. On one side, you have the good people.
Yeah.
The folks who return lost wallets, who volunteer, who protect the innocent. And on the other side, you have the bad people, the criminals, the tyrants, the ones who cause suffering. And I think it's just really comforting to imagine that wall is thick, that it's made of stone, and that you are standing safely on the good side.
It is. I mean, it's a very comforting binary way of looking at the world. Categorizing humanity that way, it gives us a profound sense of safety. It lets us look at atrocities and say, well, I would never do that because I am fundamentally different from the person who did.
But history and psychology tell a deeply unsettling, completely different story.
They really do.
Yeah, when you look at the actual data of human behavior,
Yeah.
that wall isn't made of concrete at all. It's actually this highly permeable membrane. And today, we're pulling from a massive stack of historical data, psychological research, and the foundational text of Philip Zimbardo's book, The Lucifer Effect, to ask a highly uncomfortable question.
And it is a tough one.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Consider this. Are you capable of evil? I mean, we all walk around with this self-serving egocentric bias, right?
Yeah.
We genuinely believe our moral compass is permanently fixed, just pointing north. But today, we're going to challenge that by looking at the staggering, terrifying power of situations and systems to completely overwrite our internal code.
Yeah, and to grasp what Zimbardo is arguing about human malleability, I mean, we should really start with a visual metaphor. Think of the famous M.C. Escher woodcut titled Circle Limit the Fourth.
Oh, right, the one with the angels and demons.
Exactly. It's a circular pattern that is entirely filled with white angels and black horned demons.
And they are perfectly interlocked, right, like puzzle pieces fitting into each other with zero empty space.
That lack of empty space is the whole point. The boundary between them is shared. You literally cannot perceive the shape of the angels without, simultaneously seeing the shape of the demons. They define one another's borders.
Wow.
Yeah, and Zimbardo uses this to fundamentally shift our definition of evil. Instead of some, supernatural force, he defines evil functionally. He says it is intentionally behaving in ways that harm, demean, or destroy innocent others, or, and this is crucial, using systemic power to let others do it on your behalf.
Which completely upends the core argument we usually have as a society. I mean, we usually look at someone who does something terrible and immediately label them a bad apple.
Right.
We just assume there's a deep intrinsic flaw in their character.
And that is the traditional dispositional view of evil. It's essentialist. We look for the pathology isolated within the individual, but Zimbardo argues for a situational view, and the difference there is massive. Well, he compares the dispositional approach to a medical model of health. Like if someone is sick, a doctor treats the sick person. But the situational approach is like a public health model. If a child gets sick from eating lead paint in their apartment, treating the child at the hospital doesn't actually solve the problem if you just send them right back to the exact same toxic apartment.
Because they're just going to get sick again?
Exactly. You have to scrape the lead paint off the walls. You have to treat the environment that created the sickness in the first place.
Okay, let me jump in here. Because my immediate reaction, and probably the reaction of anyone listening to this deep dive right now, is to push back on that. Doesn't blaming the environment just let people off the hook for their horrible choices?
That's a very common reaction, yeah.
Because if we just say, oh, the lead paint made them do it, aren't we completely removing personal accountability? It feels like an excuse.
What's fascinating here is that Zimbardo actually anticipates that exact pushback. And he explicitly states this does not excuse immoral or illegal acts. Yeah, situational analysis isn't about absolving anyone of responsibility. It's about explaining the behavior so we aren't just perpetually treating symptoms while the disease spreads. I mean, if a system is corrupting people and we only punish the individual but leave the toxic environment totally intact, that environment is just going to corrupt the next person who walks into the room.
That makes sense. So if situations create the bad apples, we really have to ask, who creates the bad situations? Like, where does that toxic environment actually come from?
That requires us to shift our focus from the bad barrel, which is the immediate situation, to the barrel
The
maker.
barrel makers.
Right, the barrel makers are the systemic power structures. The system is the power elite, the authority figures who arrange the conditions of life. They create the rules, the laws, the propaganda, and the physical environments that dictate the reality that the rest of us live in.
And the sources bring up a historical example of this that is just a masterclass in bureaucratic systemic barrel making, the Inquisition. We tend to think of it as just a period of religious fanaticism, but the text focuses on a specific manual, the Malleus Maleficarum, or the Witch's Hammer.
Right. The Malleus Maleficarum wasn't just a book, it was essentially the operating manual for a systemic mechanism. It created a massive, normalized WID program, which identification and destruction.
A literal WID program. Wow.
Yeah. The systemic power structure decreed that evil in the world was caused by witches, so it instituted a vast, bureaucratic, normalized process of spies, interrogations, torture, and executions to purge them.
And the most terrifying part to me is that the people carrying this out weren't all like psychopathic killers.
Not at all.
They were judges, local religious leaders, and just ordinary community members who were simply following a systemic directive.
Exactly. And that systemic power operates by creating what Zimbardo calls the hostile imagination.
A hostile imagination.
Yeah, it's the use of propaganda and authority to paint a specific group of people as a dehumanized existential enemy. Once a system successfully implants this hostile imagination into the populace, ordinary people can be convinced to commit unspeakable atrocities because, well, they no longer believe they are hurting humans.
It makes me think of hacking a computer's operating system,
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
right? Like, the system doesn't need to rewrite every single file in an individual's brain. It just needs to change the foundational code of who qualifies as human.
Precisely.
Once you reclassify your neighbor as a threat or a pest at the OS level, the brain's antivirus software, like our natural biological empathy, it just stops protecting them. It doesn't even trigger.
That is exactly how the hostile imagination functions. The empathy fails to trigger because the target has been fundamentally miscategorized by the system, and the text provides incredibly dark historical facts regarding how this plays out in reality.
It's pretty grim.
It really is. During the 1994 Rwandan genocide, between 800,000 and 1 million Rwandans were killed in a matter of months, largely with simple farm tools like machetes.
Unbelievable.
The majority Hutus slaughtered the minority Tutsis. And what is critical to understand about this specific barrel is that the racial distinction between Hutu and Tutsi was arbitrarily created decades earlier by colonialists.
Wait, really?
Yeah, before that systemic intervention, they shared the same language, religion, and communities.
And the text mentions a specific figure that really highlights how thoroughly this OS hack overrides normal human behavior. Pauline Diramasuhuko.
Yes, exactly.
She wasn't a general or a warlord. She was the Minister of Family and Women's Affairs.
A role traditionally associated with caretaking and societal protection.
Right.
Yet the historical record detailed in our sources notes that she ordered the systematic rape and burning of Tutsi women. She literally provided the gasoline from her own vehicle to burn 70 women and girls alive.
Oh my God.
At one point, young men under her command reported they were too tired from killing all day to assault the women, so she instructed them to just scatter the gasoline and burn them instead.
It's just a total inversion of morality.
It is.
And the sources impartially detail similar mechanics during the rape of Nanking, where Japanese soldiers butchered up to 350,000 Chinese civilians. The text notes soldiers turned torture into public performances and like sadistic games. Men were used for bayonet practice. Up to 80,000 women were assaulted.
When a system successfully creates that hostile imagination, the target is completely stripped of their humanity. They become an abstract concept, a demon or an animal. And once they are an animal, any level of violence feels justified to the perpetrator.
But, you know, history is full of these massive, sweeping societal tragedies. What I really want to drill down into is how this transformation happens on a micro level.
Right, the individual level.
Exactly, inside an ordinary person's brain. How does a college student or a local farmer actually slip into becoming a monster?
To understand that micro-level shift, we look to the psychologist Albert Bandura and his theory of moral disengagement. Bandura uses a brilliant analogy to explain the mechanics of this. He says human morality is essentially like a gear shift in a car.
Okay, I like this. A gear shift.
Yeah. We navigate our lives assuming our morality is always engaged, always in drive or park, keeping us in control and safe. But Bandura points out that certain situational triggers can push that internal moral gear shift into neutral.
And when you're in neutral.
Right, if you push a car into neutral while it's parked on a steep incline, the car's going to roll downhill. At that point, it's the physical circumstances, the gravity, the incline, the obstacles in the environment that determine the severity of the crash, not the driver's original intent. The driver is just along for the ride.
Wow.
Mm.
And Bandura didn't just theorize this, he proved it in a lab.
Mm.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because the mechanism of how easily that gear shift slips into neutral is terrifying.
It is.
They brought in college students and gave them a task. They were supposed to help another group of students improve their problem-solving skills by administering electric shocks when the other group made errors.
A classic setup.
Right, and the students administering the shocks could choose the intensity, from very mild all the way up to severe.
And the researchers separated the shock-administering students into 3 groups. The only difference between these groups was a single, seemingly throwaway phrase they overheard an assistant say about the people they were about to shock.
Just one phrase.
Yeah.
For the first group, they knew absolutely nothing about the people on the receiving end, and they acted fairly normally. They gave an average shock level of about 5 out of 10.
Then you have the second group. For them, the assistant accidentally let it slip over the intercom that the other students seemed like nice guys.
Nice guys.
Yeah. And when the students heard that label, their compassion engaged. The shock levels they administered dropped significantly, down to a level 3. The nice guy label triggered their empathy.
But the third group, for them, the assistant casually referred to the other group of students as animals. Just that one word, animals.
A powerful word.
And the students who overheard that single word ramped the shocks up to a highly aggressive, punitive level 8. They bypassed their empathy completely, rationalizing that they were just teaching them a good lesson because of one word. I want you, the listener, to really think about the fragility of that. If your reality, your empathy, and your capacity to inflict pain can be so drastically altered by overhearing a single, casually dropped word like animal, how much control do you actually have over your own moral compass?
It raises profound questions about how dependent our internal guardrails are on external cues. Because it isn't just words or propaganda that shift our morality into neutral. Our physical environment, and whether we feel seen or completely anonymous, plays a massive role in stripping away the social contracts that keep us civilized.
So we know anonymity can alter behavior. And Zimbardo actually ran a real-world test on this that birthed the famous broken windows theory of crime.
He did.
He wanted to see exactly how environments dismantle our internal rules. So he took an automobile, left the hood up, removed the license plates, and abandoned it on a street in the Bronx, New York.
Right, and by removing the plates and leaving the hood up, he was sending a clear environmental signal: this car is vulnerable and no one is watching it.
And what happened?
Almost immediately, normal, well-dressed, white adults, not stereotypical gang members or kids looking for trouble, but everyday citizens commuting to work or walking down the street, began stripping it in broad daylight.
Broad daylight.
Yes. Within a few days, the car was completely destroyed in 23 separate incidents of vandalism. The sheer anonymity of the busy city street was enough to push their moral gear shifts into neutral. They didn't even need the cover of darkness.
But then he ran the exact same test on the other side of the country. He left an identical car, hood up, no plates, on a street in Palo Alto, California, right near the Stanford University campus.
And the result was very different.
Totally different. For an entire week, the car went completely untouched. In fact, one day it started to rain, and a neighbor actually came out of their house and closed the hood of the abandoned car just to keep the engine dry.
That's amazing.
When Zimbardo finally came back to drive the car away, the neighbors called the police to report a stolen car.
The contrast is jarring.
Right, but what does this actually prove? I mean, does this just mean that people in Palo Alto are simply better apples than people in the Bronx? That they possess superior inherent moral character?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of situational behavior, it has absolutely nothing to do with inherently better people.
Okay.
It is entirely about the mechanism of what Zimbardo calls ambient anonymity versus community trust. In the Bronx at that time, there was a high degree of ambient anonymity. There were so many people moving so fast that everyone felt completely unknown and unaccountable.
You're just a face in the crowd.
Exactly. When you feel anonymous, you don't fear social consequences. Your internal moral guardrails vanish because there's no external enforcement.
And in Palo Alto, it was the opposite.
Precisely. In Palo Alto, there was a strong sense of community contract and reciprocal altruism.
Reciprocal altruism.
Yeah, let's break down reciprocal altruism. It's the unspoken social contract of, I won't break your windows if you don't break mine because we have to look each other in the eye tomorrow.
Right.
They felt seen. They expected others to act according to the rules of their shared, highly visible environment.
So we know anonymity can make ordinary people steal car parts in broad daylight. But stealing a radiator isn't torture.
No, it's not.
How do we leap from property damage to actual physical abuse of another human being? That brings us to how Zimbardo escalated these exact theories in the infamous Stanford Prison Experiment. And what's crucial to understand is that Palo Alto wasn't some perfect, tranquil utopia at the time.
Not at all. The historical context of the Stanford Prison Experiment is vital. It was 1970. The Vietnam War protests were at their absolute peak, and there was massive town-gown tension between the Stanford students and the Palo Alto police.
It was a very volatile time.
Extremely. The protests had escalated into tear gas, riots, and severe injuries on campus. It was a deeply polarized, chaotic environment.
So, to try and depolarize the situation, the relatively new police chief, James Zurcher, agreed to help Zimbardo with a mock prison experiment. The stated goal was to study how people socialize into the roles of guards and prisoners, maybe build some empathy and help relations.
But getting the police to actually execute the setup was a different story.
Right.
Zimbardo wanted the experiment to start with maximum psychological realism. He wanted the police to go out and physically arrest the student volunteers at their homes in front of their neighbors.
That's intense.
It is. But when Chief Zurcher was away for the weekend, the duty sergeant at the station flat out refused. He wouldn't pull his men off active duty to go do surprise arrests of college kids for a psychology study.
And this is where the story gets incredibly ironic. Because Zimbardo realizes he needs to manipulate the police to get his experiment off the ground.
Yes.
So he brings a local Channel 4 TV news crew to the police station.
He leverages the exact situational pressures he's studying. He exploited the officers' vanity and the department's need for good public relations.
Wow.
He knew they wouldn't pass up the chance to look highly professional on the evening news. Because of the cameras, he got two officers, Bob and Joe Sparico, to agree. They went out on a Sunday morning and conducted real-life arrests of the student volunteers.
Real arrests.
They charged them with burglary and armed robbery, read them their Miranda rights, spread-eagled them against squad cars, and blindfolded them in front of their neighbor.
The irony is just staggering. I mean, Zimbardo, the researcher, studying how situational pressure alters behavior, literally uses situational pressure, the presence of a TV camera, to coerce the police into breaking their own protocol. He essentially proved his own theory before the fake prisoners even arrived at the fake jail.
He did, and it set the stage for a terrifying descent into abuse. The Stanford Prison Experiment spiraled out of control so rapidly it had to be shut down in just 6 days.
6 days.
Yeah. The students assigned as guards became tyrannical and sadistic, and the students assigned as prisoners suffered extreme emotional breakdowns. But what makes this research so hauntingly relevant today is the chilling parallels Zimbardo draws between what happened in that artificial basement at Stanford and the real-world abuses that occurred decades later at the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq.
The photographs that leaked from Abu Ghraib shocked the entire world.
They did. But when Zimbardo saw them, he recognized them immediately.
Wow.
He had seen them before in his own data. The exact same horrifying imagery emerged in both places. In the mock prison in California and in the real dungeon in Iraq, the situational forces produced naked, shackled prisoners. They produced bags put over detainees' heads. They produced forced sexual humiliation and extreme physical stress.
The sources mention the iconic Triangle Man photo from Abu Ghraib, the hooded detainee standing precariously on a box with wires attached to his fingers.
Yes. And Zimbardo actually ended up serving as an expert witness for one of the military police guards, Staff Sergeant Chip Frederick.
Right.
Zimbardo analyzed the systemic failures that created that specific bad barrel, the lack of leadership oversight, the grueling shifts, the physical exhaustion, and the intense pressure from intelligence officers to soften up the detainees for interrogation.
It's just a perfect storm.
It is. He noted that one 21-year-old female MP at Abu Ghraib actually described the horrific abuse as just fun and games.
Fun and games. That's chilling.
That phrase right there is the ultimate sign of moral disengagement. The gear shift is completely in neutral, the hostile imagination is fully installed, and the humanity of the victims is entirely invisible to the perpetrators.
Is a heavy reality to confront. But, that is exactly why we dive into these sources, because the line between good and evil is not a concrete wall. It is a highly permeable membrane. We are all, every single one of us listening, highly susceptible to the barrel we are placed in.
That's
Whether that barrel is a bustling neighborhood street in the Bronx, a mock prison in a university basement, or a real dungeon in Iraq, the situational forces at play can absolutely overwhelm our individual dispositions if we aren't aware of them.
That is the sobering truth of the data. But the sources also leave us with a crucial, empowering counter-concept.
I think we need some empowerment right now.
We do. If we must accept the banality of evil, the idea that ordinary, everyday people can commit despicable acts under the right systemic pressures, then we must also recognize the banality of heroism.
The banality of heroism. I love the framing of that.
The people who resist systemic evil are rarely magical, inherently special beings. They don't possess superhuman moral fortitude. They are ordinary everymen and everywomen.
Just normal people.
Just normal people. What makes them heroes is that they simply recognize the situational trap for what it is, and they choose to act when the bell rings. They resist the pressure to conform, they refuse to obey blind authority, and they reject the hostile imagination that tells them to dehumanize the other.
They see the OS hack happening, and they refuse the update. So the question you have to ask yourself isn't just whether you are capable of evil, it's this. When your environment pushes you toward the dark, when the system tries to put your morality into neutral, will you recognize the illusion? Or will you just follow the script? Will you see the wall for what it is? Because that concrete barrier between good and evil you picture in your head, it doesn't exist. The only thing standing between the two is your awareness of the situation and your willingness to pull the emergency brake before the car rolls down the hill.